Hey, I'm with Dr. Rebecca Roach, and today we're going to be talking about homework. And that's something that we might make us cringe back when we were students, might make you excited as an educator, might make you wince in pain as a parent. But let's just kick it off with something practical. So, if you're going to just sum up one thing that educators need to know about homework, what would the one thing be?
That homework should not be instruction. It should be a reinforcement. That if one of your students is going home uncertain about a skill that you taught that day, and that student has to go home and receive instruction from a grown-up at home, that's not homework. So always make sure whatever you're giving a student to do, it's to reinforce a skill that they just learned that day so that their brains have started to take in that skill and there's some reinforcement. And you want to make sure they get that reinforcement so they don't lose that skill before they go back the next day. I know there was a really big push in the 90s and early 2000s, the more homework, the better.
Hmm.
And that other countries were outdoing us because they're doing hours and hours and hours of homework. And lots of private schools really dug down into that. Um, and I just don't agree with that. And then at the same time, there are studies saying don't ever give homework and they make homework out to be evil. And my experience has been homework can be very beneficial in reinforcing skills, provided number one, students are 100% clear on what they are practicing and reinforcing when they go home. Number two, it doesn't take extra effort from a grown up at home.
Hmm.
And it shouldn't take extra materials either. So when a kid goes home, if even if I would recommend if you have homework and you see those students who are struggling, don't give the homework that night. Just don't do it. I mean, you'll get more out of that and it builds a better relationship with your families because it is so hard for families with as busy as families are to have a kid crying at the dining room table or at the kitchen table and a family member frustrated because they can't
Hmm.
help that student with this new type of math or with the complex literacy strategy you sent home. So
You know,
my,
that
go
brings
ahead.
to mind that quote that we've often heard that practice makes permanent, practice doesn't make perfect. And
Doesn't.
what you're saying is that if I'm sending stuff home that the student doesn't have the skill, they may not be fluent in the skill, but they don't have the skill at all. And then the parent may not have the skill. And if I'm forcing them to practice it, it's making permanent whatever errors the kid is having with that content in there. And it makes the struggle, the parent struggle, the tears and the at the
Yeah.
table and all of that.
And
So
I
yeah.
think that's one reason why families, the grown-ups at home often love to get a spelling list.
Hmm.
And I went away from spelling lists for a while because I felt like memorizing the spelling of a word really doesn't give you anything. And then instead, you need to learn the spelling rules. But I know when I started to shift in that direction, there was a great outcry from my families, the grown-ups, where's the spelling list? Because families, those grown-ups got a sense of accomplishment from helping and getting
Hmm.
that spelling list. And so sometimes we deny families what Joyce Epstein calls that at-home learning component of family engagement is learning at home.
Hmm.
And so as educators, we have this balance of what's too much learning at home because research has shown learning at home has lots of benefits to reinforcing, but also making families feel like that they're involved in a child's education.
Hmm.
So homework can be really beneficial in many ways if it's structured correctly. One, as an elementary teacher, one form of homework that I found very effective was for a child to read aloud to a grown-up. Now, when we choose something to read aloud, remember it can't be instruction, it has to be reinforcement. So it should be on the independent reading level.
Okay,
And
so let me
I,
stop right there because I want to capture this positive momentum about homework because I think
yes,
it's important to know that there's really great things about homework and there's really terrible things about homework, but this is what I'm hearing already. Okay, so a really powerful moment about homework is that homework can actually help empower parents to have a really great experience with their child at home
Yes.
if you're sending the right stuff that empowers them. And that even because you're right, I get it that with my kids, if there was a spelling list, like I can clearly look at the list and tell if they're spelling it right.
Right.
But then there's also this fostering of this collaborative experience together when my child is doing a read aloud, that I can actually sit with them and listen to them read aloud whatever they're reading. So I hadn't actually thought about that, but that the right homework sent home can actually foster really positive family experiences
Yes.
in a way that makes things better instead of making things worse with the tears at the table. So
Yes.
I'm hearing some of those really great things about homework. Like, what are some other positive things about homework that it's important if we were going to make a case for it?
Mm. So as a caretaker at home, I also feel like I am part of my child's education
Mm,
and that I know what's going on. I know part of what's going on. I know part of what that my child is learning because I'm a part of that.
mhm,
And also, if let's say the example in elementary or even middle school, reading aloud to a grown up, that's something. For example, a parent came to me who had five children. They're about a year apart each, all girls, delightful family. And she said, I just don't have time to sit down beside and do homework for all five of my kids. I said, well, with Read Aloud, you can be driving from one place to another, and your child can be in the back seat reading aloud if they get stuck on a word, and they shouldn't be getting stuck on lots of words because remember, we said it's practice, it's not instruction. It should be on their independent level.
mm,
But that child can spell the word aloud while you're driving and then you can tell them, this is the word. Or you can be cooking and your child can be at the table. And while you're cooking, that child can be reading aloud to you.
mm.
Um,
Okay, so I know vocabulary instruction, like that's one of your strengths, as a
mhm.
researcher, as an author, like you just got a lot of vocab skills. What's another idea of a vocabulary practice that I, as a parent, can incorporate somehow through my time with my kids that might help reinforce the vocab that my kids are learning at school?
I tell teachers that a lot of the independent centers that you have in your classroom, like card games and things like that, that you're giving for independent and, practice, are kits that you can send home.
Mm,
And so you may have a memory matching game of vocabulary and definitions.
mm,
And so you can just sit at the table. It's a quick game. I would often give games to my kids and say, teach this to a person at home.
mm,
And I had math games too. Teach this to a person at home. They weren't expensive to reproduce. Usually they were just something that I photocopied and kids cut out and we stuck it in a Ziploc bag and they took it home. So if it didn't come back, not a big deal.
mm,
But those kind of activities also foster a get around the table, let's play a game
mm.
type of environment because we're playing fewer and fewer board games as families all the time. And so if you start sending some of those things home, that's really helpful too.
Yeah. That reminds me of because we all have to consider the children and students that are part of families in which the adults aren't engaged, that possibly the adults aren't even present. That when you look at the literature, I think of even some systematic procedures like constant time delay and those other types of things, that there are actually studies that show that peers engaging in the learning experiences actually that there's positive effects in
Mhm.
learning. There are some studies on some of those systematic procedures showing that actually siblings could deliver intervention. So taking that research and looking back to the vocab and the instruction at home, is that even if the parent is not engaging with the child for a variety of reasons, if there's another person in the home, they can be in that space. And it makes sense that homework is for reinforcement, homework is not for direct instruction. Well, then it doesn't matter if it's the older sister, the grandmother, or the uncle. If you're sending home, like in vocab, the sorting and matching games and those types of things, not only is it an experience that anybody can do with them, you're actually putting your student in the driver's seat of like, look at these vocab cards I cut out and brought home in my baggie. So now I'm, as the child, being able to bring an experience to my family, whatever it may look like, and I'm doing vocab instruction at the same time.
Mhm. And I wouldn't switch up. I wouldn't switch up the type of homework you're sending out all the time. I found in my classroom what was effective, and other teachers have told me that if you can choose about four types of homework that you send home all over and over again throughout the year, and parents just want to know what to expect.
Hmm.
And we have parents who are maybe working two jobs.
Hmm.
We have parents, families who have food insecurity. And
Hmm.
so homework's not real high up there on the list. We have to acknowledge that sometimes. Um, but if your parents know what to expect when it comes home, when it comes back, and it doesn't change, that builds a better relationship from family to school. But also, parents just know, okay, I know spelling always goes home on Monday, and I know there's going to be a test on Friday. Or there's a great program called Words Their Way, and it's a phonics program, and it does have reproducible cards that you cut out and you play the same games with it every single time. Parents know, okay, the Words Their Way cards are coming home on Monday, and I know there's going to be a test on Friday.
Hmm.
And so if parents have that predictable schedule of when things are going to happen, then they know, okay, this is my part of the job, and I have ownership of this, and I know how this works.
Okay,
I
so
think it's
this
frustrating when
is
you change it up all the time.
a really great idea, and it'd be awesome if you created this at some point where teachers could just use yours as a template. But I've got four children, and they've my youngest is in middle school, and my older two have graduated from college. But like, never did I get at the beginning of a school year a parent homework survival pack,
Hmm.
right? Imagine this would be powerful is I, as a parent, my child is in your classroom and you do all of the things that you have to do at the beginning of the year. And then you hand me a packet and you're like, look, these are the four kinds of homework that I'm going to send home this year. And here's how you can do them. And then you just kind of help me know what you're looking for, how to do it. And then you have like this emergency management guide. Okay, mom or dad, when you have no idea and your child has no idea, this is what I want you to do. And mom or dad, so it's like, and helping me understand from you as a teacher, these are your homework expectations. This is what I can do as a parent. When I don't know what's going on, this is a way as a parent, you know what I mean? And it allows that homework experience to make my family better, not worse. And I love that idea about having four types of homework or just having some sort of predictable system so that
Hmm.
my family gets in a groove and we
That's
can
it.
just
They need to get in
make
a
it.
groove. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
you know
such a
it's
great idea.
predictable throughout the whole year. This is the homework I give the whole year, and this is how it looks. The other thing I would recommend is family resource centers
Mm-hmm.
creating homework um, boxes that
Mm-hmm.
have that every kid gets that has some pencils, mechanical pencils, or it has also a sharpener, an extra eraser, because first thing kids wear down is that eraser, a little pair of scissors,
Mm-hmm.
anything that you think kids need, because we assume that families have all of those things and they know where they are on any given day, or that kids will bring it home in the backpack
Yeah.
and then bring it back again. And so I did that one year with my family resource center where we had mostly it was invitation only. Teachers recommended those families that had the most trouble with homework and families who admitted I can't get him to do his homework. And so we talked about, making sure your kid does homework in the same place every day.
Mm,
And there's a quiet space. And it may not be, they may not, we assume kids have their own bedrooms.
mm,
They often don't. And oftentimes there's a space where the TV's on and people are cooking and kids are trying to do their work at the same time somewhere.
yeah,
Um, or they're rushing around trying to find a pair of scissors to cut something out you sent home.
yeah.
So having homework kits that go out at the beginning of the year and maybe you refresh halfway through, that's really helpful too.
Okay,
Um,
so let's take a moment. Let's talk about the dark side of homework.
yeah,
Okay. So because the research out there's author researchers that are like homework is great, and there's authors out there saying homework is
there is.
terrible, and they're fighting back and forth. So talk about the dark side of homework. Like
Oh, the
where have you seen it go wrong, and what do we need to be aware of and to avoid?
I've seen it go wrong, especially when I was working on my dissertation, I was working with grandparents raising grandchildren. That was the topic of my dissertation. And I asked the question on, what are the biggest challenges? And they always said math. The
Mm,
way kids do math now is different the way I do math. And then my kid will go home, my grandchild will come home to me, and they don't know how to do it either. And they've barely coasted through the lecture, and they get home and they have homework, and they're going to get in trouble if it's not done, and they're crying, and I can't help.
mm.
Also, the dioramas. Okay. Now, if you want, and I used to do big, once in a while, big culminating projects, but I made sure I sent home, this is what, if you want kids to do a big project, this is what worked for me. I had a take-home folder that my kids took to parents every Friday, and it had a newsletter with all the announcements, all the graded work, anything that was less than a C had to be signed and sent back to me, so I knew a family saw it. But also, if there was a big project coming up and it was a culminating project, was you got to do a diorama or you got to do this or that. I didn't give just one project diorama. That's expensive. It's time consuming and it takes artistic talent. And I guarantee if you don't inform parents ahead of time, you're going to have worn out, angry moms at Walmart the night before it's due because some kid said, I got a diorama due tomorrow.
Mhm.
So what I did was I had at the end of, let's say, Dolphins at Daybreak, we just all read the book together and you're going to do a culminating project. I had a list of 5 things that a family could sit down and choose from. And it could be a diorama. It could be a movie poster. It could be a crossword puzzle. So there were 5 things. Some parents love to go out and buy Play-Doh and all that. So I had one of those. I had one of those. And then the expectation, a very short little rubric, 1 to 5, what I expect this to be was in there under each one. And then a parent, at least a week before the project was due, would check the project they were going to do with their child and they would sign off.
Mm.
And then a reminder went home halfway through. Hey, you said that your child was going to do and it was a little form and the kids filled it out.
Mm.
Mom, Dad, we're going to do this together and it's due on this day. And it went home in the folder.
Mm.
See? So no surprises. And we talk about student choice. We very rarely talk about family choice.
Mm.
Anything you ask them to do. And I'm not saying big projects aren't wonderfully fun. And it's a great way also to build family involvement, like bring in your carved pumpkin. Those create a lot of energy. And they really are some learning at home experiences that empower families. But don't assume everybody has the same budget and time.
Mm.
Give alternatives when it comes to big
Yeah.
projects.
So what, like, I love how you're framing it. Like, what I'm hearing you say is homework, as an educator, you are the guide on the side of equipping, empowering them to do the homework. You're not the dump and run,
Yeah,
right?
that's, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But so often when I first started as a teacher, I felt like I'm the teacher and I'm assigning this to you as the parent, and you're going to take the ball that I threw the ball and now, you're going to have to make the basket.
Yeah.
Those folks are autonomous. They
Mm-hmm.
are out there on their own with their own resources and sometimes with very little time and other kids.
Mm-hmm.
Also, understand if you've got 4 kids in elementary school or even 3 kids in elementary school at the same time, multiply whatever you give by 3.
Mm-hmm.
And you now have given someone at home another full-time job.
Yeah. Hey, listen, as a parent of multiples, like I'm just thinking logins, right? Like you send me all these logins and all these different websites and all of this,
That's
and I've got
Dojo.
kids of these different ages. Now you've multiplied the number of logins that I have times 3. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I don't know if my login for this is for that kid and what email it's and oh
Yeah. And we assume that everybody wants to see everything that's going on in your classroom right now through Dojo or whatever. I had a
yeah.
74 grandparent who said, I hate Dojo, and that's your job. Classroom management is not my job. I don't need to know everything that my grandchild did today in class.
Yeah.
There's that assumption that the more we involve you, the better it is. And there's probably research that shows that's true. And at the same time, there's research that shows that's not true. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
um,
Too much of a good thing's a bad thing.
too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and those families who want to be super involved. I had some stay-home parents, they were all moms, and they were at home with a young child, and they say, I can't come into school and I want to be really involved. What can I do? And I was like, I've got some center cards that you could cut out for me because
Mm,
I used to have a full-time classroom assistant and I don't now. And so what I would do is they had scissors at home. I would just send home stuff that needed to be cut out,
mm.
stuff that needed to be colored. I'd have it laminated. I'd send it home. It was lovely. They would send it right back to me. Beautiful.
Okay, so again,
And
powerful idea.
there's so many ways you can get involved.
Yes.
Doesn't mean extra homework.
Yeah,
So
and
I would say there are levels of involvement. Not everybody can do the same thing. And don't think the more homework you give, the more, or the more dojo, or the more, and
mhm.
here's my Facebook, and you can see everybody and everything going on in my classroom, that everybody's going to want to do that.
Yeah. I really love that idea of, like cutting out things or prepping things
Yeah.
because I'm just thinking like I'm thinking of a fifth grade boy that you give to him a stack of papers in, a giant bag that you've already communicated with the mom or the dad that you're going to cut out these cards for the activity. So now there's this pride and this responsibility and something that's really special that only he gets to do. And then he takes it home and then his mom or his dad or grandmother gets to cut everything out and then he gets to bring it back. I mean,
Right.
that's it doesn't cost any money. It's
No.
not requiring any money of the family and it allows just this belonging, this sense of belonging to come together. That's such, and then I'm thinking it from a content perspective. So maybe it's the new set of vocabulary words. So now this mom is getting like a preview of the vocabulary words that are now going to be a part of what's coming up in a lesson.
Yeah.
That's just, man, that's really powerful in the way that you're combining all of the parts of homework in a way that makes your life better as an educator, the child's life better as a student, and the parent's life better doing what she does at home and at school.
And wanted something to do.
Yeah,
So, and then I would acknowledge that mom in the newsletter.
yeah.
Thanks, so and so. And then I'd
Hmm.
put the child's name, so and so's mom, and then her full name.
Yeah.
Doing this for us this
And
week.
and that's why this is why it's exhausting being an educator. Because if you put out a need, sometimes you have the same three parents do it all.
Yeah.
So now, if you're going to do that, you have to seek out a parent that wants to be a part, that's not going to put themselves up in front of everybody and nurturing that relationship in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah.
So it goes back to being an educator is exhausting, but man, it is so worth it.
It's so rewarding. And I
Mm,
can tell you, I felt like one of my greatest strengths was family engagement.
mm,
Um, and I know there are horror stories about parents, and I had some of those too, but I could count them on one hand the whole time I was teaching.
mm,
Keeping open communication, not overwhelming your parents, listening to your parents. Um, I would love for us to sometime to have a conversation on the effective um, open house visit. The
yeah,
years that I have been a teacher, what works and what bombs,
yeah.
because that sets the stage. And the one advice I would give people with homework, with uh,
Mhm.
discipline,
All right,
manage,
so we're gonna do that. We're gonna set that.
yeah,
That's gonna be an
is make sure they're
episode.
your partner.
So, and when we have that conversation, could you make sure that we dial back up this homework conversation
Yes.
about how to create a homework survival guide for parents in your open house? That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so let me wrap up with this piece. Okay, so when you look at the stages of learning, there's lots of different people that have their different take on it, but I'm just going to use the four stages of learning. Acquisition, I didn't
Mhm.
know it, now I do. Fluency, I now know it better and faster and more accurate. Maintenance, I actually know it long after when you've stopped teaching me. It's still with it. I can maintain it. And then generalization, I can take what I've learned and I can use it in lots of different settings. Okay. So acquisition, fluency, maintenance, and generalization. If I understood this correctly, and then help me get it where I get it wrong, what you're saying is homework is a tool for it to be effective. It cannot be an acquisition level type of a
No.
homework assignment. That a homework assignment needs to be fluency, which means you already know how to do it. This just gives you practice at getting better and faster at it. Um, maintenance, let's just look at maintenance and then we'll wrap up with that. How could I use homework as a maintenance activity that, because as a teacher, I'm teaching all through the year, but then we've got some high stakes assessment at the end of the year. I need to make sure they can maintain what I taught them in September when they're going to take a test in March, April, or May. So, what would be one example of how I might be able to use maintenance, just keeping it fresh, something they already knew and learned, as a homework activity? What would be an
Mhm.
example in any subject in any
I
grade?
mean, that can really be just revisiting a skill again that
Hmm.
you know that they've mastered, that you did in an earlier unit coming back around again. And I think so often like math worksheets are so underrated.
Hmm.
Those are,
Hmm.
you're talking about, like you said, that sort of, I see homework as that transition from fluency to maintenance.
Hmm.
Like you
That's
want to be able
good.
to, yeah, it's between those two, fluency and maintenance. It's that transition in between. You're starting to build fluency when you're in the classroom, but it takes that reinforcement and that practice on those skills. And oftentimes for homework, we're talking about lower level mastered skills
Hmm.
as opposed to, I would like you to work on the skill of inferencing.
Hmm.
Okay, we're not going to do that at home.
Yeah.
We're not. We
Yeah.
are, and we're not going to be discussing symbolism.
Hmm.
Um, there's some parents who would dig deep and really love doing that, but really, when you're between supper and bath time, this is not something you want to take on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So that and then another thing I would do when I taught math is I would teach a new skill, and then we would do the practice. We would do the little practice before, and then there's always homework in the book. They would do that practice, and I would sit in the front of the room and I'd have them rotate in and I would check their first three problems.
Hmm.
And if you don't have your first three problems, we're going to have to reteach before you do that homework.
Hmm.
So if
That's
most of,
good. So
yeah,
then you could
it's
have
fast.
possibly an
Mhm.
alternate homework activity for
You
those
can.
students.
You
Hmm.
can. So I would do that. I'd do whatever I was doing on the board and we would practice. We practice together. And then I would say, okay, let's do, it was almost like pre-homework.
Hmm.
We're going to do the first three questions together because usually the first three questions in math homework will hit the three variations of that skill.
Hmm.
Do those first three. And as soon as you're done, I'm sitting in the front of the room and you're just going to, three of you lined up at a time. There should be no more than three people at my desk. Three people at a time. If you're waiting, then you've got a book to read at your desk. My kids always had some type of book to read,
Yeah.
but you're going to rotate. And I knew the answers quickly. But oftentimes when I did that, if it was the wrong answer, let's say if it's long division, I could quickly scan and go, here's your problem.
Hmm. That's
And,
good.
and a big part of mathematics and being able to teach mathematics is being able to analyze the wrong answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So doing that quick check took about 8 to 10 minutes in my class to get them rotating in really quickly. Most of them had the answer right,
Hmm.
but really
So
flat kids who didn't.
So that right there, that's going to be a whole nother conversation that we're
Yeah.
going to have in the future. So you guys can be on the lookout for it is how do I get time back in my classroom? And what you just shared is a really powerful example that doing that activity took about 8 minutes. But
That
think
formative
about
assessment.
Right. So think about all of the instructional time that you got back
We did.
because you were able to identify errors and error patterns early on and correct them rather than allowing these error patterns to persist over the next 2 months. And then you lost months of instructional time because that student was stuck all the way back at that piece and everything that came after it didn't come through.
And if the first 10 that come up to your class bombed it, stop. You're reteaching
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. I call it the 80-20 rule.
Right. Formative
If
assessment is so
80% of
important.
them get it, move on and circle back around to the other 20%.
Mhm.
But if less than 80% are getting it, then you stop, you hit whole group, you bring everybody back. And
Yep.
that's where guided note, not guided note, that's where choral responding and response cards, like those are two strategies that we've talked about in the past, can be really powerful. Okay. All right. So lots of homework stuff. I really encourage everyone to go back through and have the pause button ready because I want you to listen to some tools that are being shared, hit pause, capture those tools because I want them to be moved into your toolkit. And then press play and listen to some more, capture those tools and put them in your toolkit because this one is packed full of ideas to use with homework. So thanks for being a part.